thank you very much for joining us. Were you shocked as we've been here on Talk TV by these figures really showing a complete collapse in the number of cases that lead to charge across the United Kingdom's police forces?
Oh, absolutely. Grim reading, even for me to read it and actually kind of think what's going on. And I think you have to understand how we've got there. If it's 43 forces, out of those 22 have been graded by His Royal Majesty's Inspectorate as inadequate. 6 of those forces, and some of them being the biggest, including the Met, are under special measures. You know, we have to look at how did policing get to this grim situation? Because at the end of each of these crimes, there's a victim. Victims have been let down. Victims haven't been given the service that they deserve from policing. The taxpayer doesn't deserve what's happening at this moment. So, I mean, it's competing demands, it's lack of experience. And lack of experience is actually quite a big one, because there's a whole generation of police officers that are on the streets that don't have the skill and knowledge that they need to be able to do it. And that includes frontline officers and detectives. And they don't really have anybody to go to for help. Compounded with that is workload and the demand that's placed on them, which sometimes is so much that people are leaving, along with austerity cuts. Look, we can sit here and I can go through all those reasons for you, but the fact is that it's a dire situation, and it's about how do we move forward. If you think that over 250,000 crimes have been closed with no person identified, and the leads haven't been followed that have been given, those are eye-watering numbers. Those are just in one aspect, and we haven't even looked at robbery, rape. Really quite concerning.
No, so I mean, let's go through some of those issues that you've raised, because I think it's really important. This is a completely unacceptable situation to have most police forces, by any normal measure, by a normal person, forget the watchdog, whatever it is, any normal measure, people who looked at this would say police forces in the United Kingdom are failing, not just the taxpayer, not just the victims of crime, but every single person here in the UK. It's deeply, deeply serious. So let's look at that workload and demand issues. We were talking here just a moment ago about a lot of these reports that we see, people being misgendered online. Suddenly that is a crime. Now, that may be completely correct, but is that feeling when you go out and talk to people? I go knocking on doors in Lancashire, talk to people in Rosendale and Darwin, they say, look, all sorts of things now the police are being asked to do, they just simply shouldn't be doing. They shouldn't be going around and arresting people for putting things on Twitter and Facebook. They should be nicking real criminals who are breaking into your house. Have you, from your experience in the police, seen sort of mission creep with the amount of jobs and crimes that we expect police to deal with?
The answer to that is yes and no. Certainly in terms of what policing has been dealing with for many years, and not just now, hasn't been police work. 83% is not about solving or detecting crime. So yes, and that's to do with, a lot of that's to do with the, if you like, competing demands and other services that haven't been able to deal with what they're supposed to deal with. And one of the issues is, in society, there's more vulnerable persons, there's more mental health issues and concerns. So policing has have to divert and deal with that. Although I do believe in the Met, the Commissioner said that policing won't be dealing with mental health issues. But in terms of saying,
can I just pull you, before you carry on with some really interesting statistics, really interesting point, I just want to pull you up on them I could not, in a reasonable way. First of all, just extraordinary. I just want to emphasise, 83% of things that police officers are dealing with are not crime. So we shouldn't be surprised that the charge rate has gone from 1 in 18 to 1 in 6, because the vast majority of police officers' time, they're not dealing with things that are crimes. So it sort of confirms the suspicion that people have. But also, yes, the Met has stopped attending mental health crisis situations. That was quite well publicised earlier in the year, except where there's a danger to life. Well, they will, of course, quite correctly always attend. But that happened in other areas. For example, in Lancashire, where I live, that happened about a year ago. There was no sort of hullabaloo or fanfare when it happened. I'd never really understood why it was such a big issue for the Met doing that, because they're just doing things that many other police forces are doing to try and release resources, aren't they?
Yes, they are. And, you know, if you think that 80% or 83% is not detecting or dealing with crime, and there's a young generation of police officers, as I've said earlier, that don't know how to deal with and investigate crime. And that's been reflected in these reports. So if you've never dealt with something and all of a sudden you are faced as a young frontline officer or detective, you've now got to go and deal with the crime that you have no idea, no skill to do. There will be things where things are closed. I mean, one of the things the reports found, and I'm sure you've read this as well, is that police officers are not turning up to the scene. And when they're turning up, they're not actually seizing exhibits or the scene. They're not policing that scene. And that's quite concerning that they don't know how to do it. So it's not because they don't want to do it, it's because they actually don't know how to do it.
But there's been a bit of a turnaround in that in Greater Manchester, one of the forces that had a bit of good news actually out of this report, because it went from special measures back into sort of normal operation. They've got this who's described as an anti-woke chief constable. And the reason he's been described as anti-woke, because he's just complete and utter nonsense, is that he said that we expect police officers to attend every single burglary, just for that point you make, to seize evidence, and actually just to reassure the public, which is a big part of it. Do we need more anti-woke chief constables prioritising proper, good old-fashioned policing here in the UK, Nusrat?
Got nothing to do with being, it's all about being woke. It's got nothing to do with woke. Woke is about, if you look at the definition, it's to do with equality, it's to get justice. Turning up to a burglary is not woke. Doing things, investigating crime is not woke. And I think we need to be very clear, because it's easy to say, oh, they've been, it's been policing has been woke, and that's why we're not investigating crime. Not that, it's a lack of investment in policing. It's the stripping of resources, stripping of skills, knowledges, and quite honestly, neglect that's led to this. Somebody turning up to a Pride event and waving the Pride flag once a year doesn't impact on your ability to investigate a crime. So I think we need to be very careful.
Nusrat, I agree with you, which is why I said, I'm sure you did listen, I said he is wrongly described as an anti-woke chief constable, because what he's really doing is saying, let the police, who cares about people wearing rainbow lanyards and things like that? People should be absolutely free to do that, to express themselves and to show that they are properly part of society and integrated with it. He hasn't really changed any of that. He's just said, if you are a victim of a crime, the police will turn up. I think we need a bit more of that. Nusrat, thank you so much for joining us and enlightening us on what is a very, very important subject.